everyone, and welcome to Legislative Insight. I am standing on the stage at the Newport Opera House. Imagine, if you will, the theater restored to its original beauty, completely filled with 700 theatergoers looking forward to the presentation right here on stage. It will be possible thanks in part to a cultural bond approved in 2014. With the heave-ho of a shovel, history will be restored, beauty will be uncovered, and a treasure once again revealed. The Newport Opera House on Washington Square is slated to be refurbished back to its glory days. In the 1920s, people flocked to movie and opera houses like this one across the country, hoping to get a sneak peek at the talent. Alison Varecka, chair of the board of the Newport Opera House, is spearheading the push to restore this architectural gem.
It was built in 1867, 2 years after the end of the Civil War, and then in 1929, when Talking Pictures came in, they did a total refit of the building into a movie palace. So what you see here is what was done in 1929. The front of the building is exactly as it looked in 1867. The whole interior of the building was redone in 1929. So when the Opera House opened in 1867, it really was that function for the community. Everything came onto the stage, everything that was passing through. There were jugglers, there was opera, there were plays that would come down. Edwin Booth would bring his troupe down from Boston.
The Newport Opera House presented entertainers like Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, and perhaps one of the biggest names in jazz at the time, the Duke, Duke Ellington.
Don't mean a thing if you ain't got that swing.
They would try things out, and then, you know, if it was popular in Newport, they would bring it down to New York or up to Boston. So it really was a show town, and apparently there were a number of theaters, but this is really the last grand theater left that hasn't been either repurposed or torn down. So it's truly a treasure.
This treasure appeals to many, including two of Rhode Island's legislative leaders in Washington, Congressman David Cicilline and Senator Jack Reed. But credit for a large part of the financial backing for the project lies with local leaders like Newport resident Senate President Teresa Paiva-Weed.
This building and this project are incredibly important. It has been quite a few years in the making, in the dreaming. As Senator Reed mentioned, a planning grant in 2005 from the federal government to see what was possible. And during the very difficult times economically, the recession, it was due to the tenacity of people like Alison Varecka and Ann Livingston and Dominique Alfandre, the arts community here in Newport, that the project continued to survive and step by step. Last year, as part of the November election, the referendum was approved, and this money was the largest direct bond issue for Newport County in recent recollection. When this building's done, it provides an important economic hub for Newport, linking Broadway and downtown Newport together with Jane Pickens Theater, in many ways creating a small arts district right here in the heart of Newport. It's a historic building as well, being one of the 10 oldest theaters in the country, and certainly plays an integral role in not just Newport's historic history, but the state's historic tourism market.
The referendum, which voters approved in 2014, was for a total of $30 million, funds that will go towards improving the facilities of performance halls across the state. $4.2 million of that total is earmarked for this opera house, one of 10 of the oldest theaters in the country.
I think the people of Rhode Island really recognize the value of art, culture. This is a big day, not only for the Newport Opera House, but also for all of Rhode Island. This opera house is one of 10 old theaters in the United States of America. And the fact now that there's groundbreaking, it's going to be redesigned, refurbished, opening again in December 2017. It is exciting that we'll see plays, we'll have music, there'll be comedy. It's great, not only for Newport, but for the whole state of Rhode Island. It's all about putting people to work, the economy, but also really valuing the arts and the culture that's so important to the fabric of the state.
How do legislators work when it's something in your hometown as opposed to someone up in Burrillville? Are they supportive because they can look at the bigger picture?
I believe so, because we all are in this together, and somebody from Burrillville, from Gloucester, from Exeter will enjoy the plays, the comedy, the theater at the Newport Opera House. It's just like saying, well, will people from Newport go to McCoy Stadium and see a baseball game? Of course they will. You know, it's Rhode Island. You can go from Woonsocket to Westerly in an hour. So let's enjoy all of the treasures and the features that we have in this state and celebrate it.
I have been here before when there was a show that was going on, because I remember an old organ that was in the corner, so it was a great time.
So you're a firm believer in let's rebuild and renovate rather than start over from scratch?
Oh, I think so. I think in many places when you have a character that fits the city and that fits the people, it fits the artist community, that I'm really a believer in investing or reinvesting in those buildings to bring back that character that's so great.
And you're going to have people from all over the world visiting Newport, perhaps for a summer vacation, and for them to take in a show here, the best press or exposure is word of mouth, correct?
Oh, I think people really don't realize that we get, and my numbers may be off a little bit, but we get something like 2.5 million visitors who come to this city every year, particularly in the summertime, and they are from all over the world. We get people who come off cruise ships to Newport, and so for people who are used to going to theaters, when I lived in Europe for 5 years, I remember going to theaters. I didn't even understand the language, but it was great to be in those things. So I think people who are used to that are going to use it, and it can be part of a tourist package also for people who come over on cruise ships or come here as part of what they do. So it's going to be wonderful. It's an educational experience as well as an entertaining experience.
The Newport Opera House was built in 1867 as a first-class amenity to the newly finished Perry House Hotel. In the 1920s, the flourishing motion picture industry began to dominate the entertainment world. The stage gave way to a single-screen cinema palace. And in 1970, the building was again converted, this time to a 3-screen multiplex.
Well, it was all chopped up inside. It didn't look like it looked now. It had, if I remember correctly, it had several theaters in it, and walls, and very narrow, long seats. It was not really that pleasant as a movie theater, quite frankly. I think that, from what I understand, the uses of the property have changed over the years from the 19th century, and that's how it ultimately landed as the movie theater. And of course, we have the Jane Pickens right up the street, which is another historic theater, which has already done some renovations, so they're a little bit ahead. But no, clearly this was a theater area for the city going back. I know a little bit about the history, and we're going to bring it all back right on Washington Square.
And you're looking forward to see it come back to true character.
Of course, of course. You know, it's a great pride of mine to represent Newport, and now we're going to have this wonderful theater here.
And as a neighbor of this building, did it break your heart a little bit to see it fall into disrepair?
It did, but what has been more amazing is as they've torn down the facade that was in the front, the original brick had been covered up with pieces of wood and the words Opera House written on top. So one of the early stages, if you're able to get a shot from the outside, was the taking down of the old facade and the exposure of the brick. And it's much like putting your pipes in the basement. A lot of the work they've had to do has been to maintain the structural integrity of the project. But now, with this bond issue, together with the private donations, which continue to be solicited till this day, we can really have our own small PPAC right here in Newport.
Senate President Teresa Paiva-Weed has already alluded to the work involved in this rehab. We were given a full tour by architect Mohammed Farzan, getting a glimpse as to what's involved with this restoration project, beginning with the facade. The vinyl siding has been peeled away, revealing protected bricks and preserved windows. The focus of the project lies with the focal point of any theater, the stage.
Which we don't have a stage that is deep enough. Right behind that brick wall is the Brick Alley, which is a 7-foot right-of-way that the city of Newport has. That property actually belongs to the Opera House, but years ago it was deeded or given as a right-of-way, and of course the public enjoy walking down to the, from Spring Street to Thames Street, so obviously that's going to stay as a public passage. We are using the space we have in the house to enhance our stage shortcoming. In that regard, we're going to also mitigate the intrusion of the stage by historic preservation standards.
Is that more of a challenge for you to stay within those guidelines?
Yes and no. It is a challenge, but it's a guideline as well. When you don't have the guidelines, you're almost operating in a vacuum, because you can imagine that you can take everything down or demolish and replace, and then you have to ask yourself, what am I going to do after I demolish something? When you have the guidelines, they actually try and suggest that you should keep what works and change it only if you have to for safety or life safety. And those things are easily accommodated. So we obviously have some structural challenges here, and we also have some acoustical challenges. The good news is that acoustically, the building itself is fine. So we have to be careful about what we introduce into the building as far as seats or finishes, that they're not going to compromise it. We had our acoustical engineer here, and he was scanning the building with his equipment, and he was amazed how good it is. Because as you can imagine, we're almost at this point where we are standing, we are almost one whole floor below ground. If you look at the brick behind the stage, that line, that shelf, is where the brick alley walkway is. We also are downsizing it a little bit. I mean, this theater at some point had 1,200 seats in it. But of course, back in the day, the seats were tiny, and people were putting like sardines in the theaters. And we are also reducing the balcony size enough to make the number 700 work. The magic number 700 was the result of a business study that was carried out for the community in Newport, and it proved to be the right number, because you don't want to have a house that is so big that sometimes performers feel uncomfortable if it's not full. So 700 proved to be the right number economically, but also in terms of having a good atmosphere for the audience as well as the performers.
Now, I think most of us are familiar with the plays that come to PPAC and the size of that venue. How does this compare?
Mostly what comes into PPAC are things that they know will sell 2,300 seats. So, you get Jersey Boys and Pippin and Lion King and the big Broadway. This will not be that kind of a venue. This will be hopefully used by the Newport Festivals Foundation for the Jazz and Folk festivals to do more year-round programming. We have a wonderful music festival here, classical music festival. They can keep that going year-round if they have a facility. There just isn't anything like this. And we're a very, very unique size. 700 seats is very unique in Rhode Island. There's smaller venues. Trinity Rep has a 400-seat theater and a 250. PPAC is, I think, 2,300. That
sounds right.
About 2,300. Veterans is, I don't know, huge. It's 3,000 or something. So there isn't anything in this exact size. So I think that the musicians are going to find it extremely intimate to be playing on this stage. And anything else as well. No matter what we do in here, I think the audience is going to feel very connected. And that's really what you want. Mm-hmm. You really want the audience to be really totally engaged with what's going on the stage.
The historic preservation aspect of this, just to go over that, is going to bring some elements that were lost. And those are, for instance, the grill work that you see up there. That was there for the sound system that they had back in the day. They had an organ system, and that was letting the sound of the organ come out. So we are going to actually use that now as part of our HVAC system. We don't need the organ sound, but we do need the air to move. So we are using what was there, but for a new use, what we call adaptive reuse of some of these details. The radiator won't be needed. However, it's a very useful device for us that it's framed the way it is, Because as Alison mentioned, the stage is going to come out here and engaging that end of the proscenium arch. So we are actually using that opening by extending it down to the stage as what we call a Shakespeare door. Because now if the curtain is down and some actor or performer needs to come out and say something, they can use the Shakespeare door. So on both sides of the stage, we are going to transform them to doors. So it's sort of using what's there in a way that is respectful of history, but it works for today's needs. So the center will be all seats, and each one, the rows are 3 feet apart, and the seats that we have a sample of are very comfortable. And there's enough room for people to have enough leg room, so the comfort, creature comforts are all there.
And how about lighting? Is lighting a challenge in this building?
There are several types of lighting we have. We have historic lighting, which is examples of it are left here. They would have to receive a special lens to put back there. We have photographs that shows us what there was. So they will be fitted with energy efficient lamps, but they will be historically correct look. So that's the historic lighting, and there will also be sconces on the walls. But then we have the theater lighting, which is the technical lighting that would be used for the stage, and those are all on their own system, rigging and everything else. And then, of course, we have the modern life safety lights, like for the aisles to have lights by the seats, and also have the exit lights and all of that. So there are 3 types of lighting that we are doing, packages that are putting out for construction.
Who has the biggest job in this project? Is it rewiring the building?
I would say the mechanical systems, believe it or not, are the biggest, because the challenge is to keep the noise level so low that you're not aware that any air is moving at any time. Yet theaters are terribly difficult to control, because you can imagine there's 700 people here all of a sudden, and they all need to have either cooling, most likely cooling, but sometimes heating. Sure. Whereas most of the time, the theater is empty and doesn't need anything or very little. So as soon as the 700 come in here for a few hours, for those few hours, you have to really deal with that body of number of people, sort of like a church. You know, all week long, the church is fine, but then on a Sunday morning, you suddenly have like, you know, several hundred people occupying the space, and they're all moving and, you know, breathing and want to be comfortable. So mechanical systems are typically the hardest part of any theater, to keep the noise down. And then after that, of course, lighting, because, you know, the lighting has to be just perfect for the audience, but also for recording. And then acoustics are the next thing, because this is a place where in this particular theater would be the only one in Newport that you're going to make recordings of performances. So it has to be absolutely perfect. And here we have a different type of lighting. This would be a cove lighting. Fortunately, this is an easy one to fix, because whatever LED lighting that we put in the cove would not be visible. So we just see the result of the light by illuminating the tray ceiling.
Are you impressed with how well the building has kept its character?
Very much so. As I said about the brick facade outside that was covered for years, that kept all the windows and the brick intact, the interior was also covered with fabric for the sake of the movie theater. So all the plaster moldings that you see here, where you can see they're perfect. They look like they have just been painted, because they were all covered with fabric and nobody bothered to damage them. So we were very lucky. And then on the lobbies, you can see later on that they had acoustical ceiling dropped. So all the plaster moldings above them were kept intact. And we're just a matter of...
such a treasure.
It is a treasure. And it is...
And just think like, yeah. Oh, that's one piece of work.
We don't have to do.
The big piece that you don't have to do.
Well, we do have to repair,
yes.
But it's a manageable repair.
And how about the structure of the entire building?
It's built like a railway bridge. Our structural engineers, or ODE engineers from Providence, they made a comment about the trusses that support the balcony here, that it's the exact design of a bridge, and that in fact is so massive, it's probably overbuilt for what we know, but it was something that they really had. Maybe it was a new technology, or they were very excited about life safety or what have you, but they have done an amazing job in building this building with a steel structure that they put in here. And they did it very quickly too, which is another remarkable thing, that back then in 1927, they had the willpower and the know-how to do this in a tight city urban area, which there wasn't any room to work with. There's a photograph that shows them pushing that steel truss through a hole they made in the brick wall. And it's amazing to watch that, how they managed to slide it into the building and put it in the place that it is now. This area here would be what we call a sound lobby. So there will be a pair of doors between the lobby and here, and then there will be other pair of doors going into the house. So you'll have able to block the light and the sound before you use any of those. There is some damage done to the plaster, but it's very minimal, and it's certainly easy to fix. But you can see all this design was kept behind the acoustical drop ceiling, which saved it from being damaged. Right. So we are creating a lobby that is really the main lobby on the second level. And that would extend all the way from the balcony to the street side. So it would be almost twice the size of this lobby. So that means that during intermissions, the people who are in the orchestra level will have to go up either using the elevator or the stairs to use that lobby. So the upper lobby, the same way, the ceiling was covered up with the acoustical tiles, so you couldn't tell this barrel vault, what we call a barrel vault, is in a very original condition. Obviously the paint is peeling, but that is not a problem because paint is something we need to know what the color was to put it back. So all this stenciling and the combination of plaster molding and wood molding will be redone to its original condition. So we are very fortunate to have this all intact. Parts of the truss I was talking about. So if you imagine if this was a railway bridge and you had a huge steel truss, the upper part of the truss is there, the bottom part of the truss is below us, and this is part of the truss that holds it together. So it's not a column because there is nothing on the floor below, it's just these two are here. Historically, back then when that was an extension of the hotel bedrooms and the guest rooms, there was no connection between the front and the theater. The front of the building was basically a different use and the theater was behind. By opening this wall completely from end to end, we're going to be able to capture the space that used to be the guest rooms and add them to the lobby. So now the lobby would extend all the way from under the balcony to the street front. And adds, of course, good views of Washington Square, sure, which is going to be very nice. And obviously, elevator will end up here, and bathrooms will be all here as well.
Okay. The grade of the balcony will be redesigned so each guest has a view of the stage. So the seats will go all the way up?
The seats go actually all the way up to where you're standing.
Just here?
Yes. Okay. We are changing this center section into the operation box, if you like, so that it would actually be a place where it would be sealed with a glass and the control box would be basically here, control booth. And then we will have some limited seating on that side, which will be handicap accessible from the level above. And then we'll have a special box here, I'm going to say about 12 seats. And that is also going to be enclosed, similar to the control booth. And that is what we refer to as the crying baby booth. So if you have someone who either coughs or doesn't want to disturb the show but wants to be there, they can be in that room and not have to worry about it.
Oh, you've thought of everything.
Well, these are the details our theater consultant, Chris Buckley, has been very careful about making sure we don't forget. But certainly you would appreciate the proscenium arch and the decorative elements of that.
That's beautiful.
Which is very nice. Now here are the two chandeliers that are kept. They're still here. And they are actually the decorative element of them is the light bulbs. So in this case, we are going to replace the light bulbs with a correct shape, you can say geometric shape they have, of Edison bulbs, and they go back there. There was a chandelier at some point, we can see from photographs, in the middle there, but that's gone.
How will you find one that is worthy of this theater?
I know, it would be hard, you could make one.
The grand opening is slated for December 2017. A new marquee on the front of the building will welcome the talent, and guests can gather for a pre-show cocktail on what's being called The cherry on top of this project, a new roof deck offering views of Washington Square and Newport Harbor.
What you can expect is 700 people, every seat taken, families and friends from all over, hopefully enjoying at least some local performers, maybe Newport Island Moving Company and some of our other local artists will treat us that night to events and a celebration of joy to have brought to life a venue that could have been demolished during the difficult times, could have been turned into a restaurant or department store, but rather has survived with all of its history.
Well, not only that, I said to some people today, here, there's so much excitement today, we're only groundbreaking. Imagine the excitement there'll be on the opening night, you know, magnitude of 100 or something, you know, so you got to feel today of how excited people will be when the theater opens in December of next year.
And we look forward to opening night in December of 2017. Again, I'm Margie O'Brien. Thanks for joining us for Legislative Insight.